Right, hello. So today we're continuing on our lecture on diet and exercise, and moving on from carbohydrates, we're going to look at lipids. So shirt check, we got a nice red, white and black shirt from Burton, best shop for men's clothing by far. So firstly, just talk about fats and the basics. So they contribute to about 20 to 35 of our energy per day. And it's obviously seen that reducing fat without reducing calories did not promote weight loss nor prevent cardiovascular disease or cancer. Also, increasing the consumption of these fats increases the risk of cancer, and mostly kind of intestinal and bowel cancer. Especially diets high in unsaturated fats seems to be protective. But we've got a little meh there, as some of these are debatable and studies have shown different effects, but as an overall idea, we obviously know that the less fats you consume, the healthier you are. But don't get the assumption that we don't need fats. They're obviously very important in our body to maintain that phospholipid bilayer, as well as have those energy reserves, as fat tissue stores the most energy per gram. So then we've got these trans fatty acids increase LDL and decrease HDL. So with that, when we talk about the lipoproteins, we talk about LDLs kind of being the bad guys, but they're obviously as essential as anything. But because these trans fatty acids, which we'll talk about more, they increase these LDLs, which means more fat is deposited in tissue and arteries, and that in turn decreases HDLs, which are those molecules that come to collect the fat and take it back to the liver. So if we've got more molecules that deposit fat and less that collect it, we obviously have that risk of atherosclerosis. So kind of a breakdown of our fats. So we've got these triglyceride or triacylglycerides, and they can be saturated or non-saturated. Then we've got phospholipids, such as in a phospholipid bilayer, and they emulsify and part of the bilayer. And then we've got these sterols, which are animal or plant. So we've got this process of hydrogenation, which causes double bonds to accept hydrogen atoms, so fat becomes more saturated. And the more saturated the fat becomes, the unhealthier it is, basically. Also, so unsaturated fats are favored. However, there's obviously two types of that. So we've got the cis, which is where the H atoms are on the same side. Or we've got this trans, where they're kind of like train tracks, so they're on the opposite side. That's how I remember it. And they are seen to be more dangerous because they increase kind of the rigidity of the structure. So a cis is more bent, and we want that fluidity in our bilayer to let molecules fall. But if everything is really rigid, nothing can really pass through. So that's why cis fats are favored over these trans fats. So if we break down these, so most fatty acids we can make in our body. However, there are these two which are essential, and we need to get them from diet. So that's why they're called essential fatty acids. So we've got this, firstly, omega-3s, that make this alpha-linolenic acid, which is our essential fatty acid, and they then make this eicosapentaenoic acid, and they make these serous-free eicosanoids, which are anti-inflammatory. And what that basically works, so studies have shown that an increased consumption of fish, obviously this is where we get the omegas from, they are seen to reduce heart disease and stuff like that in populations. So what that basically occurs, so kind of read this in one of the books, thought it was interesting. So we've got this thromboxane A2, which is synthesized in platelets from this arachidonic acid, and stimulates vasoconstriction, and the blood vessels get smaller, and platelet aggregation. So when we've got a wound, obviously we want this platelet to aggregate and close the wound. While we've got this prostacyclin I2, which reverses that, so we obviously again want that balance of platelet formation and degradation, as we talked about in our hemostasis lecture. However, consumption of food and replacing this arachidonic acid with eicosapentaenoic acid, so the ones we get from our omegas, is seen to favor the platelet inhibition and therefore reduce risk of thrombosis. So basically, it reduces the risk of platelets to overclot, and thrombosis basically means to clot, and reducing the risk of atherosclerosis of these blood vessels closing up and getting something like a heart attack. Fish can be seen in this case healthier compared to stuff we get trans fats from, so kind of other forms of meat or fatty products. However, if we look then at comparing fish to plant-based diet, that is seen to reduce the risk of heart disease and even further. So you can say anything is healthy, but depending on what you compare it to. On the other side, we've got these omega-6, and that's your linoleic acid. that makes this arachidonic acid, which we talk about here, and that causes series 1 and 2, so they're pro-inflammatory. So again, causing, we obviously need that as well, because we want things sometimes swell when we're infected or when this wound happens for the platelets to work, but obviously we want that balance to stay. So you can get these from fish, or I usually have flaxseed oil, or you can have flaxseed oil, but I usually just sprinkle some flax seeds, and you don't need much of them, just like a teaspoon in your porridge. And I just have that every morning to get my omegas in. But these omega fatty acids, so omega-6s tends to lower LDL cholesterol, which is good. However, it's seen that it can also lower HDL, whereas omega-3s are only seen to lower LDL cholesterol. But obviously, we do need both of them for other things as well. We also got these monounsaturated, which lower LDL cholesterol as well. Reduce our fat, and what kind of effect does that have on, firstly, colon cancer? So firstly, bacteria. So when we have good fat, that means that metabolized dietary fat and bile producing substances that may act as tumor initiators. So if we don't consume those bad fats, we get lower risk of a tumor or something actually occurring. And these bacteria also help to break down those fats if we have good ones, because most of our bacteria can't break down the trans fats that we usually eat a lot of. Then obviously fiber again can reduce the risk by allowing that fecal content to go through us quicker, and also dilutes these carcinogens that could cause these tumor initiators and cancer as well. Also fiber decreases that transit time, so reduces stool contact with the colon. Also, if we obviously eat less of that, we get less mutagens, and also we get a decreased risk of getting these nitrous amines from cured meat and beer as well. But it's seen that companies are leaning away from using those, especially in beer. But you can also get these heterocyclic amines from barbecued or grilled meat and fish. Yeah, maybe try not to have those because those are again carcinogenic. So the problems with these trans fatty acids, so the hydrogenation that we talked about before kind of alters the ability for cells to make normal reactions happen, and because they're lipid derived and they're quite similar to structures, those healthy fatty acids, they're readily incorporated into cell membranes where they are altered chemical structure and creates havoc with other reactions. They also inhibit the desaturation reactions involved in conversion of alanine to EPA and DHA, and again they compromise this gut biota that we have, and they can also inhibit normal blood flow through this atherosclerosis, also promote cell necrosis, so cell death, by enhancing extracellular ATP. So some of the controversies, so as we talked about, to do with those fish, so studies suggest that fish consumption could be protective of health, but epidemiological studies suggest that fish eaters have a higher cardiometabolic risk compared to plant-based diet people. So again, kind of pescatarians, so those who only eat fish, they're, I guess, healthier compared to meat eaters. But then if you compare fish eaters to just plant-based people, again, you can see an even bigger change. And also in mass fisheries, so the companies usually use these toxic chemicals, and these can concentrate in fish fatty tissue, and then when you eat them, they obviously into your body. And we've got these higher levels of short fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids in farmed fish compared to wild. Also kind of a link on sustainability. So obviously, we know in places like Brazil, large forests are being cut down to make room for farming, especially palm oil, and that again contributes to global warming. So not only are we cutting down trees to make space for this farming and reducing the oxygen output, we're also increasing the carbon dioxide output by making room for farming animals, which use up loads of space and again put out carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Whereas if we I guess use that space, stuff that's already been cut down, for plant-based foods, we can feed like 10 as many people and use whatever 5 times less pollutants. So yeah, that's why you should switch to plant-based diets. So I think that's basically done for fats. Next, I think we're looking at proteins. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. Check out the description for links and stuff like that. And I'll see you in the next video. Cheerio.